Narcissistic supply was first identified by Otto Fenichel, a psychoanalyst, in 1938, and he identified it as being a way for the individual to garner admiration and support and validation in order to bolster their self-esteem. When we're studying narcissistic personality disorder, there are three elements of narcissistic supply that you need to understand in order to understand the behavior and the drives of the narcissist. Number one, narcissistic supply is primarily there in the narcissist to help them bolster their grandiose, delusional self-image. So in the online space, when we're talking about narcissism, there's a certain angle that most of us have taken. It's not wrong, it's just I think that we're focusing perhaps on the wrong things. And what's very important to focus on now is this grandiose, delusional, false self. So why is that important? Because if you're sat there and you're saying, oh, well, I split up with the narcissist, or I'm in a relationship with the narcissist, and I don't understand why he does what he does. I don't understand why she says what she says. It's very confusing for me. Start with the false self. This is a person who's living half in and half out of this reality. They have chosen, they prefer to be in a grandiose, delusional version of reality that they're constantly creating moment by moment. And the narcissistic supply is the fuel that keeps that dream alive. The second thing I want you to understand is that when you're inside of a relationship with a narcissist, you are their narcissistic supply. Yes, we all know that. They want their narcissistic supply as a form of admiration and validation. Yes, we all know that. But the point of the narcissistic supply is less about like a vampire stealing blood, stealing energy from you, drinking your milkshake, and more about trying to keep a fantasy going. So I've spoken in other places about the matrix of narcissistic abuse, and that the payoff of two people entering into this dyad together, the narcissist and their followers, the narcissist and their cult followers, the narcissist and their lover, their spouse, the narcissistic parent and their children and the other family members who they use and exploit. The purpose of leveraging narcissistic supply from people is actually to feed the machine of the matrix. So if you think about a narcissistic relationship and you imagine the scene in the matrix where everybody was in a pod and everybody's effectively a human battery and they're having their life fluids drawn from them and nutrients being given to them. In exchange for that, they live in a simulated reality. So the people in the matrix were getting something out of the bargain. They were getting a fantasy version of life. The narcissistic supply is there to feed the machine. It's there. So don't think, so if you imagine a vampire, so we've got two different mythologies here. You can either go fantasy or sci-fi. Always go sci-fi. The fantasy version would be, this is a vampire. I'm the narcissist. I take my target and I drink her blood and I'm getting narcissistic supply. Yes, at a white belt level, that's not an incorrect way of understanding what's going on. But at a black belt level, I actually am not consuming anything directly as a narcissist. I am also a fellow worshipper in a certain sense of the false self, this icon, this Moloch that requires sacrifice. I'm enticing you, manipulating you, charming you, threatening you, seducing you, whatever I can to get you to give admiration and adulation to the machine, to the Moloch, to keep the fantasy that I'm in, that my survival is dependent upon, alive. And when you enter into that space with me, when you're in that shared fantasy and that matrix simulation with me, you will start to absorb my coordinates, and you will also start to feel quite unconsciously like it's very important to keep the dream alive. Remember how you defended the narcissist, how you continue sometimes to defend the narcissist? Do you remember how sometimes you forget when they've done a bad thing? It's almost like they do something horrible and you just bink, blank it out. You dissociate and blank it out. That's because you're now coerced into being a member of their cult in order to continue to get your payoff. You didn't agree to any of this consciously, of course. It's all part of the covert contract. The third thing I would like everybody to understand who's really seeking to free themselves from narcissistic abuse and to just get back on with a normal life is it's never egalitarian. It's never horizontal. It's never a case of one adult, another adult, and they're in a transaction with each other where they're giving and receiving. It can only ever be vertical. The power dynamic must be vertical, not horizontal. They must be above you. It's never adult. It's always going to be parent-child, and they're taking from you. They don't want you to offer them authentic love. They have zero interest in authentic love. Stop thinking you can love them better. You can't. They're not interested. Even if they were interested, they have no place to put that love because they can't reflect it back. So they have no empathy. So it's meaningless to them for you to say, I love you. I love the essence of you. And you're eye to eye, two vulnerable human beings in a room saying, I really love who you are. It's meaningless. It slides off. First of all, they don't want to receive anything horizontally. Second of all, this is all part of part 3, they don't actually want it for themselves. It's a kind of a delusional psychotic personality disorder that's disassociative, that fetishizes this third entity. There's you and the other followers, the other family members. If I'm a narcissistic boss, my business becomes my cult. If I'm a narcissistic gym owner, my personal trainers and my gym goers are my cult. I'm not taking it directly. I can't. I actually don't have the equipment to take love, validation, even adulation. I'm fundamentally psychotic, delusional and grandiose, but disassociative, and I'm voyeuristic. So I'm taking your love and adulation, and it never goes to me. It goes to the Moloch. It goes to the false self. It goes to the matrix machine. I hope that makes sense. It's a subtle distinction, but I think if you don't have these subtle distinctions, you can stay stuck for longer than you need to because of the bewilderment. When you're bewildered, when you're lost in the bewilderness, your mind is just full of intrigue. And when you have, it's like a puzzle that you can't solve, or a great movie that you never got to see the conclusion of. Your brain is just going, why did that happen? Why did the intrigue keeps you locked in? When you understand the subtleties and the nuances of this, you'd be like, oh, they're not actually taking it to themselves. They're taking it to a third entity, this fetishized, voyeuristic third entity that they're also part of the blood sacrifice. They sacrifice their authentic self for the Moloch, this bloodthirsty, evil, primitive God that demands daily sacrifice. They're also part of the sacrifice. But they delusionally split and see themselves. They wish to be that God. They wish to be that icon that's above everybody else and just staring down their nose. But they can only pull that fantasy off some of the time. Some of the time the fantasy diminishes and the voices, the superego injunctions in their head are saying, you're not really godlike, are you? You're useless and worthless. And when that voice comes up, and they're not in narcissistic elation, when they're full of supply, when they go into narcissistic depletion, you will see them depressed. You will see them anxious. They become very clingy. They become very insecure. They become perhaps very irritable and very, very angry because they're not in narcissistic elation. They're actually fiending for narcissistic supply. So it's very important that you also understand it can't be delivered adult. It's only ever delivered vertically, parent-child. So there's always a domination element to all of this. They don't want love. Forget about love. They don't want it. They can't do anything with your love. It doesn't help them. They need adulation. They need admiration or terror. Terror. All the things that affirm, I am low, you are high. You are the cult leader. I am the cult follower. You are the redeemer, the prophet. I am your humble acolyte and nothing more. Anything that threatens that dynamic creates narcissistic injury, which then creates narcissistic rage. And for that, you will be punished until the end of time in the worst ways imaginable. If they are mafia bosses, good luck, because you now need to go hide. If they don't have the power to actually wipe you off the face of the planet, they'll certainly do everything they can to destroy your reputation. So there's a few key points for you. Hopefully that helps get a little bit deeper in to the nuance and the technicality of narcissistic supply. My recent understanding of narcissistic abuse has had a little bit of an upgrade because I did some work with Mark Vicente. Together we created a course called Narcissists and Cults. It's very important that you are not predator blind. Remember before, you didn't know what a narcissist was, and then you fell into the hands of a narcissist. You also need to understand what a narcissistic cult is. And you need, I think, to take the time out to understand a little bit more about narcissistic cult psychology. All cults are narcissistic. It's explained inside the course in order to fully escape. And you might say, well, I wasn't in a cult. Were you in a family? Probably a cult. If it had a narcissist matriarch or a narcissist patriarch, probably a cult. Were you in a relationship with an abusive boss? Probably a cult. Were you in a relationship with just one person? Well, they recruited flying monkeys, didn't they? They helped to destroy your reputation and smear campaign you, didn't they? That's also a cult. It's a cult light. It's a cult-like activities. Cult light, L-I-T-E is what I'm saying. Even if you're only ever with one person and nobody else was involved, I still claim it was a cult of one, which is the name of my book that's available from Jeff Bezos' Slave Warehouse as we speak. But if you're interested in learning more about the psychology of cults and narcissism, you can hit this link and you can get the course that I made with Mark Vicente. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for your time and for your attention. I look forward to speaking to you all again very soon.